Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Suter. I'm the Communications Director for the Electrification Coalition, and I am here with Ben Prochazka, our National Director, and we are here with an episode of Plugging In. So, Ben, just this past week, we heard a big announcement from President Biden on infrastructure, and there were some major transportation themes in there around electrification. And so this is a really interesting time for electrification of transportation. And so how does this shift what the EC is working on?
Well, I think we have spent the last several years working at the local and state level to drive the policies and actions that are going to electrify our transportation sector. And it's really exciting because we're at this sort of perfect nexus where the technology is just about to sort of allow the electrification of every single part, every single node of our transportation system. And this clear emphasis from the new administration, so at the federal level, that now is the time to really start going big on transportation electrification. That being said, we still have a lot to do to get there, and there's a lot that needs to happen to make sure that, if the future is electric, we build the cars and the trucks and buses in the US, and we do it as fast as we can.
Right. So there were a few different elements that we have heard about so far of the transportation piece of the infrastructure plan. And so some of those parts that we know about so far are a plan to deploy 500,000 charging stations across the country, electrifying 50,000 diesel transit buses, and electrifying 20% of the school buses that are on the road. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those elements and how you feel like they are important parts of the electrification puzzle in the United States?
Sure. Well, there's no doubt that as the market continues to increase and as more vehicles are on the road, that we need to build the infrastructure to meet that market increase. And so the idea of focusing on building out a transportation electrification network and a network of chargers to meet that transportation network, it means that we're going to have to build it up in cities. We're going to have to build it up along our corridors and highways and interstates. And so that's a really exciting and an important step that needed to happen. And I hope that that's something that we can push forward in Congress and really provide the funding to support a big time effort across the country to expand access to infrastructure. On the bus side, we have, buses get something like 3 to 6 miles per gallon on average. And a transit bus, so we have about 40 or 50,000 transit buses across the country. And when you think about the idea that they are oftentimes operating at 40,000 miles a year at 3.5 to 6 miles per gallon, that's a lot of diesel fuel that's getting used. And that puts us at great economic and national security risk. It puts community health at risk. And so, other countries around the world are really rapidly accelerating bus adoption. And it makes sense that we need to be doing the same thing here. And I think this is an important step to do so. And then the last one that you mentioned, which is just school buses. I have a 3-year-old. I have I guess she's not getting on a bus yet. But I have a 9-year-old, and she's exactly the right age to really start riding the bus to school. And I actually even had a personal experience yesterday where I was biking and ended up behind one of the school buses in town. And all I could do is breathe in diesel fumes. And so not only are they bad on fuel efficiency, but every single day, our kids are being exposed to a ton of air pollution and other challenges. And so by electrifying school buses across the country, it gives us the chance to reduce pollution, reduce our economic and national security burdens, and make it so that kids can go to school with clean and healthy air.
Great.
It seems like we should do that.
Yeah, I agree. Seems like we should do that. So one of the other things that we've heard about the plan is that there is funding allocated or proposed in the plan for consumer incentives. So you mentioned that we're at this precipice of really rapid electrification. So given that we're at this point, why are consumer incentives an important policy?
Yeah, right now we're still early in the technology curve. So, even though we're going to have more than 50 models available by year's end, and those models are, the compact cars all the way up through SUVs and very quickly trucks. The Ford EF-150, Chevy recently announced that they're going to electrify the Silverado. Rivian is coming out with their truck very soon. These are there still is higher upfront costs right now for EVs than sometimes the sort of traditional internal combustion engine competitor.
Right.
And so I think that as we're in this early technology stage, the incentives are going to be critical for helping jump that chasm to then mass adoption. And we have to get to manufacturing scale, and that includes batteries. We've got to, create the supply chain in the U.S. to build batteries. We've got to work with the manufacturing sector to the point where we're at scale. And being able to build these vehicles at the same rate that we might build internal combustion engine, and then all of those costs come down, and then we start having less of a need for those incentives to exist. Actually, and one other piece is, there's risk associated with it, right? So even though I've been driving an EV for 6.5, 7 years, and it's been awesome, it still has some risk. It could, we don't know for sure what the residual value is going to be like. What's that car going to be worth after we're done driving it? Because these are new technology. And so it does make sense that we're also creating an incentive to sort of recognize there is some risk. And so we've got to help people in that first stage of this technology.
Sure. So moving over to the fleet side, we know that part of the plan really focuses on fleets. And so what are some of the key opportunities there? Why is it important to focus on the fleet piece?
Well, I think one of the opportunities is just fleets at their most basic level tend to really focus on total operational costs. And we actually created a tool called the Drive tool, DRVE, and you can find it on our website. But it helps fleet managers who are really bottom line, right? What's my bottom line cost? So over 5 years, how much is it going to cost me to operate this vehicle? The Drive tool helps create a very, very quick way to understand those costs. And basically fleets help demonstrate the benefits of transportation electrification because they show that over the lifespan of the vehicle, it's going to cost way less, right? And that matters. So
sure,
even though it might have higher upfront costs, it costs a lot less once you're using electricity as your main source of fuel. And then the other thing is like fleets are essentially, they park centrally. They tend to have a pretty clear operational profile. We know where they're going and where they're coming back to. So they really meet a lot of the sort of biggest benefits of transportation electrification. They charge at night, right? Like all those things. But I think even more importantly, and sometimes we leave out, is every person who's driving a fleet vehicle is also a consumer, right? And so we know when you put someone behind the wheel of an EV, they are way more likely to buy one. Well, every fleet vehicle then means that person is way more likely to buy one. And then the other part is that it's a proof of concept, right? So by having those out in our community every single day, doing the work of cities or doing the work of whatever fleets do, they're demonstrating that these vehicles work really well. They meet the operational need, and then they're much more likely to pass that over to the consumer market and grow adoption much faster.
Great. So the plan from the administration is going to certainly depend upon action in Congress, but it's also going to depend on partnerships from cities, states, private sector. Can you talk about some of the private sector partnerships that we are working on right now to advance electrification?
Yeah, so we one of the things that we're breaking into right now is to get into freight electrification. So EVs are getting heavy. And we're starting to work with companies like Nestle and several other companies as they've made net zero commitments, and they sort of recognize they have to change the way that they're moving stuff from A to B. It's a really exciting moment. Freight electrification is real. It's starting, right? There's already projects that are happening in California with the Volvo Light project, and Pepsi has a project in Modesto, California. And so right now we're working with Nestle and several others to develop some first stages for freight electrification, non-California locations, and are excited to continue to show and demonstrate both what are the barriers and why is it, potentially something that initially is hard, but then also what policy solutions are going to allow freight electrification to happen at scale. And I think that's going to be a really exciting outcome.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for sharing all of your thoughts about this big news from the administration. There's some exciting things that lie ahead, so it'll be really interesting to see how it all shakes out, and we'll continue to do our hard work and with many other partners out there. So Ben, you are about to head into your weekend, so we can shift gears to leisure time. So given that we are in a global pandemic and we've all been sort of trying to find our pockets of joy in the midst of all the challenges, and I know you are a musician, so during the pandemic, how have you stayed plugged into your favorite artists on the music scene?
What a great question. It's been interesting to see artists have been turning to social media to get their stuff out there and even monetizing that. And so I've seen like big name acts do that, and that's been cool. And they actually are still getting a way to sort of share their art and their work with people and still have a living. But even, I have a friend in Chapel Hill, and Bill West, in fact, and he, by way of example, is also finding that. So he's just a local musician, but is still managing to do that by using the internet and things like Instagram and Facebook and other things to really share that music. A cool one that I would check out that's been happening is a guy named Corey Henry, who used to be in a band called Snarky Puppy. But it's kind of this. It's a good band name, but it's kind of this jazz fusion funk thing. And then Corey Henry's gone off on his own, but I think he's probably one of the best keyboard players alive right now, which is a bold statement that I just made. But
that is very bold.
Check him out. He's a great weekend listening.
Sounds good. All right. Well, have a great weekend, Ben. And thanks to all of you for plugging in with us this month in April. And we'll look forward to chatting with you again next month.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.